Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. Taku is surprised that he's MVP, he decides to check the other results too. Then his necklace begins to glow, and a message appears saying it's unlocking a hidden ability. It's the necklace of the player who rebels against destiny, and he can use experience points to shop at a personal store. Taku says he doesn't understand the name, but is glad he can use the store. He opens it to see Ader guiding him to buy an item that tracks dark events. Taku doesn't know what that is, and sees that it's full of question marks. He realizes something, then buys the tracker, then a message appears saying loading dark event log. And Taku begins to understand that every stage thus far has had a dark event, the living armor on stage 1, the Piper on stage 2, the Golem army from this last stage. All of them was caused by the dark event, so the paranoia he felt was real. Someone is trying to ruin the game on purpose, but why is that? He wonders who is causing the interference. Anyways, we see a map, and far north from Crossroad is the center of the continent, which is called New Terra. It's the capital of the Everblack Empire. It has a large port that touches the inland sea and is the center of trade and distribution. It has a massive population, and in the middle of it was the central, aka the Palace of the Black Thorn Trees. Inside of the Everblack administrative office, someone knocks on the door calling for their highness, and then they inform the person inside that their younger brother had asked for reinforcements again. The man stops writing, and asks if he meant Ash. We learn that his name is Fernandez Amberkiefer Everblack. The man tells Fern that the monster invasions continue to get stronger, so he's requested immediate support. Fern asks how many times he's asked for support, to which the man tells him 3 times. Fern facepalms, saying to ignore it. The man tries to tell Fern that the situation is truly severe, and according to their information the invasions have never been this violent. Fern tells him he said to ignore it. The man apologizes, saying he understands. Then Fern says that they are finishing the war with the Bringer Dukedom on the Western Front, and the Southern Front isn't worth wasting troops. And since fighting the Dukedom is their priority, if a problem happens on the Southern Front then they can deal with it then, and Ash is a crybaby. We learn that they are attacking the enemy Dukedom's capital, and expecting a surrender within the week. Fern asks about his older brother, who is on the front lines. The first prince of the Empire, Lark Avalanche Everblack, is the commander-in-chief of the Empire's military, and is known for being on the front lines himself. But regardless of his talent in fighting, he is the first prince, so he should be in the command center rather than the front lines. Fern says both of his brothers are giving him a headache. Then he asks about his father, who the man says is still in his quarters. The Emperor has locked himself in his room for years, and he'd occasionally send letters or call in a servant to give a discreet command. Which is why the first prince takes care of external affairs, the second takes care of internal affairs. Due to this there have been bad rumors about the Emperor. And the Emperor's absence is probably what's influenced the war with the Bringer Dukedom. As the assistant goes to leave he tells Fern he needs to see something, then is handed an execution request. It's for the high treason criminals in the underground prison. He asks Fern if he'll agree. To which he says yes, then when he goes to sign it he remembers Ash's request. Then says to send the criminals. If they are going to be executed, they might as well go to the monster front. Since Ash just needs a meat shield, and if they are dying either way it doesn't matter if it's by a monster or not. The man warns Fern they aren't normal criminals, they might end up causing chaos. Fern says that's Ash's problem. And if he's that desperate for troops he'll have to deal with what he's given, so send them there using his authority. All 5 prisoners will be executed at the Southern Front, and Ash will be responsible for carrying out the task. He signs away the order for it, and smiles saying he's such a good brother. Then looks pleased with himself, asking if Ash agrees. Back to Taku, he wonders if someone is talking about him. We see he's talking to Damien, and asks him how his eyes are doing. He apologizes to Damien for making him push himself. Taku thinks about how visiting the hospital is something he can't get used to. Damien says it isn't his fault, since it was his choice. Taku pats his head, and Damien is happy, saying if he rests for a few days his vision will come back. So don't worry, Taku says he won't push him in the future. He will order him around, but he won't make him do something like this again. Taku says he promises. Damien reminds him that he's his trigger, so he can be used as much as he wants. And if he can help get rid of the monsters by killing them he'll gladly shoot even if it ruins his eyes. Then he says some hella Seuss stuff, about being used until he's broken. And Taku couldn't say no to him, since he wants to abuse Damien's broken skill. Taku asks him if he remembers their first promise, how he told him that when the time came he'd let Damien kill him. Since Damien lost his friend and all will to live, And in order to raise his spirits he turned his hatred against him into fuel for Damien to live, so he wonders if Damien still hates him, so he asks. Damien waits to respond, then says he hasn't thought about it since the promise was made, and one day when they defeat all the monsters and peace comes to the battlefront he should re-ask this question. Then he will tell him if he hates him or not. Taku says that day will never come. Since in 3 years when he gets to where he needs everything will be finished, so he must give him his answer then, and he'll accept whatever it may be. He starts to describe the relationships between him and Damien, but says it doesn't matter. He just wants Damien to be happy one day, and whatever ending he gets, that's all he hopes for. The next night after the stage was finished, Taku heads back to his bed complaining about his back. He talks about how his entire body is in shambles due to the battle, but he couldn't rest. He needed to know the exact results of the defense since he wasn't there. So he went to check the wall, along with some other areas, to do a checkup on everything. He hears someone celebrating, then says there's a victory party tonight too, so he just raised a toast and left. Since the rest can entertain the soldiers without him anyway, but realizes that isn't the case and says that maybe Jupiter can do it, since he trusts in her ability to party. He gets sleepy, but says he can't sleep yet and he opens Lucas's stats saying it's time to change jobs first. He starts pogging out over Lucas's stats. Since Lucas has job changed twice he is now an elite knight, so he unlocked his second skill too. It's called the Steps of Perseverance so he can travel a large distance instantly, and has no cooldown. While it eats a lot of MP it lets a cheat character like Lucas move hella quick. So once he learns his ultimate and gathers all of his personal equipment he will become a god of war, but that will take a long time, but will feel rewarding, so he will continue to work hard with the main character. Then he moves on to his own status and says working his way from level 1 to 20 makes him wanna cry. Since he's a hidden character he'll have a bunch of cheat skills. He's still making a WTF face about his stats. He says it's time to see the skills, then hopes he got a good one. It's called Eye of the Commander, and he wonders what it is. To sum it up, it's a mind control magic skill that is wide range. It'll be hard to maintain but it means he can control monsters if he can make eye contact. He was hoping for a more impactful skill but maybe it's good in its own way, and decides to test it soon. Next he opens his inventory and decided to open the stage. He's excited about the chests and says one would be lucky to see even 10 of these golden chests by the time you complete the game. And he hopes it gives him a weapon he can use, since he can't rely on luck anymore due to messing up his hand. He begins to pray to the god of RNG to get a good weapon, and as the chest opens we see a bright golden glow, then he's holding Harry Potter's wand. It's an SSR item called Maestro. He explains how weapons of this tier have unique abilities and effects, and this wand has the most interesting ability amongst them all. It creates magic blades which can be shot. So if he has enough MP he has a mid-range attack, so he could fight like a wizard. The most unique aspect is the buff from attacking. In addition to dealing a set amount of damage it gives a great buff, and in game he would use this weapon to smack any allies he could, so now he can do it in real life too. He wonders what to tell them so they'll let him, and wonders if he should tell them it's corporal punishment, or maybe there's a different way to convince them to be hit. He finally falls asleep, and the next morning he began to prepare for the next defense right away. His first order was to restore the advanced base. It's a fort that's right in front of the southern Black Lake. It's where they fought during the tutorial. The damage was too much so they just left it. But now it's time to start rebuilding. While it's hard to maintain if they manage to use the base well, they can minimize the number of monsters that reach the main fort. His next order was to expand the anti-air artifacts, since it's to prepare for airborne enemies. The game has multiple rules for monster armies. One of them is that flying monsters appear once in the first 5 stages, then once from stages 6 to 10. So in the remaining stages flying monsters will begin to appear. Lily says she understands and will prepare the artifacts. Then she runs away with her feet obviously, and then we begin to get a time-lapse of everything Taku's been doing, repairing the Count's weapons, making a casino, munching. And finally 3 days later, in the backyard of the manor, there is a week until the next stage. He tells everyone he hopes they rested well, as it's time to get info for the next stage. He tells everyone he's sorry, but it's time to go again. He looks over, and notices Evangeline acting embarrassed, and he asks her what's wrong. She blushes and turns around, and he wonders why she's so embarrassed, then wonders if it's because they are in the same party now after fighting the golems, or maybe because she talked about her parents. He asks her what's wrong, and she says it's fine, just finish the briefing and start. Taku says kids are hard to understand, and Damien says it's weird for him too. Taku wonders if it's because he visited him, wondering why they are acting so weird. Jupiter laughs like Scooby-Doo, and Taku asks her if she has something to say. She says it's nothing, and why would she make a fool out of herself among the young ones? He says she lives as a fool. And that Lucas is the only normal one here. Lucas kneels and starts shouting about how loyal he is, and Taku claps his hands saying enough of the small talk, and it's time to explore the dungeons. They are going to visit the third area, the northern outer wall. And there's no special gimmicks, just a single long path, so they'll just fight the monsters and keep moving forward. As long as they defeat the monsters that appear, they'll keep moving forward until they reach the end, and it's the simplest area out of them all. He says it won't take long, and they'll be back before dinner. He asks if they have any questions, and Evangeline says it's time to go. He agrees with her, then selects the area on the portal, and they all walk through it, causing the portal to crumble like usual. As they teleport, Taku gets a pop-up mentioning sending sub-parties to different areas, and he barks how he doesn't have a sub-party. We once again see the entirety of Lake City, and Lucas and Evangeline are admiring the view. Taku tells them time to go. He talks about how as he walked down from the watchtower and stepped onto the wall, he began to remember more and more about the area. The third area compared to the other areas is incredibly simple. But of course it'll be brutal. It depends on what monster they get for the wave, and as he wonders what'll appear, Lucas yells that something is here. We see a gargoyle landing atop the wall. And sure enough, they are now surrounded. Taku says he expected a flying monster. In this area the mobs will continue to appear, so they get to see the wave number. Taku tells them to finish it quickly, as the longer they sit here the worse it'll be. So go all out. Everyone says understood and begins to prepare. We get a bit of game lore, about how the two flying types earlier are either the wyverns, which are also called dragons, but they are closer to a lower version of a dragon. But since a dragon is still a dragon, and it's related to them, it's very resistant to magic, and he felt despair after making a mage party to fight them, and not to mention that it can shoot out fire from its breath too. But due to its magic resistance, it's very vulnerable to physical damage, so with archers and ballistas, but the second monsters opposed to the wyverns are strong to physical, and weak to magic. And have no ranged, so they always go straight to melee range. So while the soldiers buy time for the mages, they then use artifacts to attack. It cuts to Jupiter preparing an attack, and she's pogging out of her gourd. Taku says she's going to be running wild again, as the kill count increases and he realizes it's free experience. He says this is why you splurge for mages. Damien then asks Taku if there's anything for him to do, and he tells him no since his eyes aren't healed. Also they probably won't need to even fight, since the current members that are fighting are 2 SSR knights and an SR mage. They've also all completed their second job changes, so they should be more than capable of exploring the third area. He tells Damien to enjoy the bus, and after a bit they were able to clear a normal room. Then he throws some shade at Jupiter. They continued along the castle wall, then finally made it to the boss room. Or well, the northern door, and then follow the path down. They enter the room, and are greeted with a golden gargoyle, which is a level 30 boss. Taku recognizes it, and explains a bit of the lore and how it's decoration, also how it drops a lot of expensive stuff. Taku tells them all to get ready, but Jupiter, being the dog she is already running at the boss, drooling over the fact it's gold, and she has the gold lover trait. Taku is surprised it activated it. Taku looks worried as the boss begins to monologue and prepares to attack Jupiter. Taku tells the rest to quickly save her, since they can't let the granny die. The boss swings its mace down towards Jupiter, and Taku realizes that everyone is too far to stop it, but Jupiter does not care. Damien promptly readies his weapon, then fires towards the boss's mace. We see the 3 shots begin to redirect the attack, which narrowly misses Jupiter. She snaps out of her goblin mode, wondering what she's doing. Lucas picks her up by the collar, then puts her overhead while running. Evangeline begins to taunt the boss, and insults it. The boss looks over and is clearly insulted, and attacks at her. But she blocks it. Lucas throws Jupiter in front of Taku, and he's pissed at her. He asks if she'll continue to act like this, and scolds her even though she's the most experienced one. She admits that she made a mistake. Taku explains to us viewers how it usually only happened due to chests, but reality is different. So he must find a solution for her greed. Lucas begins to run towards Evangeline, and Jupiter says she'll help them, but fails to gather mana. Taku tells her to just focus on recovery, and she apologizes for being unsightly. Taku throws shade again, then Damien says that'll kill the boss, but Taku says he should rest too. Since he already shot 3 times using his already injured eyes, he's probably in a lot of pain. He then tells them to watch as he pulls out his wand, and summons 3 swords from it using mana. He's a bit disappointed since he only got 3 even after using half of his mana. It's his first time using magic, but he starts to get the hang of it. He raises the wand, and begins to command the swords. Jupiter says that every time she sees Taku he's always bringing something new. He says he's just him, but he's done training. Then he commands the swords to fly forward. It hits the golden gargoyle, piercing its armor, causing it to scream. Taku is happy with the damage, but sad that they aren't durable, since they broke. The boss starts to complain about it being a team diff, and Evangeline asks why it's complaining in all chat. While absorbing its damage, then she leaps at it, piercing it straight into the chest. As its entire armor is shattered, the boss begins to daydream as it's already gotten its head cut off. The boss's body drops to its knees, then crashes onto the ground in front of Evangeline. Taku scolds Jupiter, and says that her salary for a week will be used for city funds. She goes to talk back, but he kindly smiles at her, which convinces her. He continues to reprimand her, telling her to remember who she was before becoming greedy. She was a proud soldier. Since he can't control her goblin skill with his passive, so he has to hope she can do it herself. She tells him that she shouldn't be hindering them. She says if it happens again she'll take her own life. Taku says that isn't what he wants, and she then says she'll give money instead. He asks how much, and she says only a day's salary. They then awkwardly laugh, and it cuts to them finishing the area. While the boss didn't drop anything like equipment, they got a lot of gold from it. The actual chest from the boss gave another piece of the Scream set. Taku begins to wonder if it's possible to get 2 set piece items back to back. Since they got the orb last time, and now the robe. All that is left is the gloves to finish it. He gave the robe to Jupiter, then tells the rest they'll continue to the next safe point. It's the camp that Mew Myung told them about. Taku explains to the rest that there will be shops and blacksmiths there, but their goal is to scout for a new party member. And they'll do whatever they can to bring one back. Taku rushed this exploration solely for meeting a friendly NPC and getting them on his side. Because later the city will develop and the mercenary guild will boom, but now they have no choice but to find members themselves. Managing the city is just as important as battling in this game. There's a lot to take care of. He ends the story time, and tells them all to keep their eyes peeled to find someone to take back. It's not kidnapping, it's surprise adoption. Evangeline asks if there will be anyone decent here, or if there are even people. Taku says it's okay if they aren't good, and he doesn't care if it's a human or not. After their snack break, they continued downstairs. There's so many steps it made Taku wish there was an escalator, but finally they made it down. Evangeline says wow, since they are standing in front of the gate they saw for the first time when entering the kingdom. They saw it before from the outside, but now they are looking at it from the inside. At the gate, Lucas wonders how they are meant to open it, and asks Taku. He tells him that it only opens for one reason. Lucas asks what it is. Taku tells him it's when they start their invasion, when their army is ready to wage war with the human world. And only then does it open. Taku then tells them it's time to go in and visit the safe point, and they stand before the city. They take the main road from the north gate, heading into the city, and stumbled upon a huge plaza, which is full of gargoyles. Evangeline asks why they are here. Taku tells her that they will be the next enemies in the defense battle. They gather here, then head to Crossroad when it's time. Lucas asks why they can't just kill them now. Taku tells him to chill. More gargoyles fly in and sit with the rest to join formation. Taku asks what they are meant to do against an army. More importantly, they need to keep going. They continued down an alleyway for 5 minutes, until they reached their destination. It's a safe point called Base Camp, which will be their main hub for future explorations. Unlike the other areas, it's got lights set up, which Evangeline likes. It's also got fire, so they feel comforted. Taku is happy they made it, but Lucas looks tense and asks Taku if people live here. Since he doesn't see anyone at all, Taku looks around and says he's right, but finds it odd that none of the NPCs are here. He starts to get a bad feeling, and plot convenience ensues. They start to get weapons pointed at them from people wearing masks and robes. Taku wonders who they are, but says their outfit looks familiar. Based on their outfit they are high level. They also brought a holeless cannon. He doesn't see a way out, and grits his teeth, saying he let his guard down since it's a safe zone. Back inside the game, battle is impossible in here, but this is reality. There is no such thing truly as a safe zone. He is panicking internally, but manages to keep a poker face on the outside. He says that it's quite a welcome party. He appreciates the enthusiasm but would like an explanation. He tells them that they just recently began to explore, and acts playful with them. But they didn't even react in the slightest, their eyes were cold and emotionless. He makes a joke about how hazing is something of the past, and is a corrupt practice. One of them with a deep voice says that it's not a corrupt practice, but a beautiful custom. Taku is taken aback by how deep the voice is, saying he should go to the opera. The voice continues, saying that bullying the noobs has always been around, and it's a process that makes them respect their predecessors. Taku looks around wondering where the voice is coming from, then tells them to stop yapping, and calls them a boomer. We see a familiar figure appear from the shadow, saying they hear it often, and they miss the old days. We see it's the Pied Piper. The Piper says that it's a fun nickname. But that isn't his name. He says that he's a high treason criminal. He's the last musician, court jester and court magician, and that his name is Crown. This guy is the Johnny Sins of the Lake Kingdom. But he calls Taku the final player. This surprises Taku. He explains more how Crown wasn't an important NPC. He never fought in the battles and only guided monsters or debuffed the players. But he does remember in the last stage he appears in the first room of the final dungeon. He had no fighting skills, and since his party was so strong he just walked over him. But he notices that the lake's people were with him then, but how does Crown know that he's a player? He wonders if it means that Crown knows about the world system. Taku was full of questions. But he understands that escaping first is the top priority. Taku asks why they are being hostile. Crown says that Taku's party is here to uncover the kingdom's secrets, even when he doesn't know the danger that lurks here. He's trying to prevent them from that. They are the final guards who protect the kingdom, the final remnants. The Nightcrawlers, and they will incinerate anyone who tries to invade the City of Darkness. Crown raises his hand for his boys to attack. Taku realizes that if he drops his hand they'll be shot, so this is dangerous. Especially since they are surrounded by high-level enemies with good equipment. If they fire at them, someone or even all of them will die. Taku thinks of something, and says he might as well use everything he can. Then activates Eye of the Commander. As soon as he activated it, the world slowed down around him. He locks eyes with only 12 of the Nightcrawlers, and since complicated commands have a high chance of failing, he decides to keep it simple. So he tells them all to turn around. The Nightcrawlers who have less magic stats than Taku's spirit stat then turn around. This surprises Crown. Then Lucas points out that Taku's nose is bleeding. Taku tells him not to worry about it, and just run to the teleport gate. Lucas says okay, then dashes forward to clear the way. As they all begin to run, Crown says that mind control is quite interesting, then commands the crawlers to fire. Evangeline blocks the arrows, but Taku looks up to see a barrage of arrows flying at them. Evangeline says she's got it, then jumps into the air and begins to break the arrows down. She's proud of herself. Then we see the cannon's fuse being ignited, so Taku tells Damien it's his turn. Damien shoots at the cannonball, causing it to explode mid-launch. As they get closer to the teleport gate, Crown says not so fast. And mages begin to prepare some spells for them. Taku points out that both fire and wind attacks combined are hella broken, and would wipe their team. Then they watch as the spells are launched at them. Taku goes to say it's too late, but Jupiter says it's her turn to be the main character. Hits the spells with a Rasengan. It stops the spells from moving as if they've hit a barrier. But Jupiter is clearly taking immense damage as she is bleeding from her eyes. She tells Taku that she can't hold it for long, so hurry. He hesitates for a second, then begins to run with the rest. The gate begins to form up again and he picks to teleport back to his backyard. He then tells the rest to go in, and we can see Damien carrying Jupiter, but she doesn't look good. Taku says since the crawlers couldn't stop them they gave up on attacking, and just stood there, menacingly. Taku gets angry, then hits Crown with his own words. A third-rate villain's line, and leaves. We see they've received some chests, along with some of them leveling up. But Granny Jupiter is critically injured. It cuts to the temple, and Taku's having some serious post-nut clarity. He wonders if they'll have to fight more people like Crown in the future. And debates if they'll need to kill people in the future. While it was just a game he didn't care about it. But this isn't a matter of PvP since it's reality. And he begins to have the dilemma that Damien had in the first chapter. Taku's morals begin to conflict as he's unsure if he can fight people. Is it really okay for him to murder? We hear the Saintess call out to him, and he asks her if the treatment is over. She says yes, and none of them have life-threatening injuries, but Jupiter has some serious trauma now and she's in a state of magic overload. Taku says that sounds dangerous. The Saintess explains that it's when the caster's magic goes crazy and it begins to eat away at their body. So she must rest for a while, Taku asks if he can visit her, to which the Saintess says no. Taku wonders if he was too harsh on her for her goblin mode activating. The Saintess says the rest are waiting outside for him, and he hands her payment and leaves. He asks the rest how they are feeling. They say they are fine, but ask about Jupiter, then he tells them she'll be out of commission for a while. And if it was any worse she'd have died there, hell they'd all be dead if she didn't block it. Everyone's looks sad since Jupiter is hurt, but Taku informs them that they'll get their revenge for her. This surprises the party, but he says that since they messed with the prince they'll need to pay the price. But it isn't time for that right now, their preparations must be perfect. After they clear the stage, and finish preparing for the next one they'll beat them up. They'll be meticulously wiped out for what they've done. He quickly 180s his emotions, telling everyone to take the day off and rest. Taku goes back home, then starts to think about the defense for the upcoming wave. They can substitute Jupiter for Lily, but she isn't a wide-range sorcerer like Jupiter. Ader cuts his inner monologue short, by running and screaming. Taku trips him, and starts to scold him. Asking if he's truly doing his job, Ader says of course, but that's not important. He says this stage might be the worst event. And that the prisoners have escaped their carriage. Taku is taken aback, then asks what prisoners. We don't get to hear the explanation, but Taku recaps that it's from the reinforcements from the capital, and how they were sent prisoners instead of soldiers. Those prisoners were being transported here, but they escaped the carriage. While it happened earlier today they've still not been caught. Ader says he should make YouTube videos, and Taku gets angry at him and calls him asking why he didn't prevent this. Ader says he has no powers here, and cannot predict the future. Taku begins to choke him out, until Ader offers that he'll give him the prisoner's info and to check it out. Taku says he should have led with that, then opens the system window to see. He is shocked. Ader says they are still reinforcements after all, so if they are utilized well they can be a huge help. Taku puts on a serious face, saying he'll do whatever he can to win them over to his side. Ader comments how they are criminals. Taku says it's better than zombies or ghosts, and that their abilities are quite good. He throws shade at Ader, asking if he knows where they've escaped to. Ader says they are in the mountains just north of the city. Taku says to take him there immediately. The northern mountains aren't cultivated yet, even though the rest of the area around the city is, which means that it's got some seriously rough conditions. Taku is gassed out from the hike. Lucas offers to piggyback him, which makes Taku gets happy, and Evangeline gives him a sassy stare. Taku says she shouldn't give that kind of look, asking if she's jealous and if she wants him to carry her. She blushes, and he explains he wants to create a human totem pole. They both start to say how much they dislike that. The banter is interrupted by the captain of the escort forces, who says he's ashamed of his mistake. Taku says it's nothing, then says his back hurts. The captain quickly headbutts the ground, saying he's made a grave mistake, so to spare his life please. Taku tells him it's just a joke, and asks if he thinks he's a demon. Evangeline says that Taku does have a history of crazy things. Taku says he guesses that makes sense, then double checks with the captain that the prisoners escaped here. He says yes. Taku wonders why they escaped here, instead of somewhere nice. Evangeline tells him that bandits have lived in the mountains here for quite a while, and they attack and plunder anyone they cross. Taku says that he sees, and based on the broken weapons and wagon wheels around them, people have been here recently. Lucas asks if they think the prisoners came here because of the bandits. Taku says that maybe if they escaped to join the bandits it doesn't seem like a bad way to start a new life for them. But he doesn't understand many things here. Taku confirms with the captain there aren't any lies with the report. Of course the captain says no. They hiked for another 10 minutes, until finally stumbling across what they suspect is the bandits' hideout. Lucas says there might be enemies, so he'll take a look first. Evangeline says she'll go too. Taku tells them to be careful. As they approach the gate, Taku was worried they'd get arrows rained onto them, but there weren't any signs of activity. But the closer they got, the more they could smell the blood. Lucas says they are about to break in, then counts down and they burst through the door. To see that on the other side is a complete bloodbath, as they walk around. Taku says it's a complete mess, then wonders if it could have been an internal conflict. Lucas tells him that he's found a survivor, and the kid is crying and screaming. Taku tells him to relax, and they are the royal forces. According to the bandits' crimes the kid can be hanged or jailed, but they won't kill him here. The kid cries, saying they only robbed a single carriage. Taku understands that the carriage they robbed was the one with the prisoners, and instead of finding goods, they were slaughtered instead. When opening the carriage, Taku asks the captain why he said the prisoners escaped alone, and why the kid is giving a different story. Taku's tone changes to serious, and he says that he understands the captain was just embarrassed about being robbed by mere bandits. The captain drops to his knees asking for forgiveness. Taku says he'll forgive the accident, but not the lying. Taku says he shouldn't have made such a blatant lie, and wondered if he really thought he'd not check the situation out. And decides that's probably what the captain thought, but even now, the situation hasn't been fully explained. Where are the prisoners at? Evangeline calls out to him, and tells him to look at this, and one of the prisoners greets Taku, saying they've been awaiting his arrival. As they are all on their knees, Taku wonders why they didn't just run away instead. One of the prisoners say they had no intention of escaping, they are waiting for their sentence to be carried out as fast as possible. Taku recognizes the prisoner's hair color, and says that the only race with that color are elves. The prisoners beg for their execution, and that they'd like it to be carried out immediately. Taku is taken aback, since he can't let his sub-party die. Taku says he'd like to confirm their identities first. He dismisses all the other guards. We learn one of the elves is named Godhand. The group of elves are the 8th team of Iggy's counterintelligence. This shocks Evangeline and Lucas. It's understandable why. It's because it's the secret team that does all the Empire's dirty work, the royal family's task force. Taku says that Godhand doesn't seem like a real name. The elf says they don't have real names, their code names are all they have. Taku goes along with it, then says he heard they've committed treason. Godhand says yes. Taku asks if they are admitting to the charges. Godhand says with all due respect, they've already stood in front of the capital's court. Their verdicts and punishment have already been confirmed. So they need to be swiftly executed as per their punishment. Taku sweats since he doesn't want to do that, he needs to persuade them. Taku says he has a few curiosities, and if they are going to die anyway they can answer some questions. He has the authority to do that at least. Godhand says nothing. Taku takes it as agreement to speak a bit longer. Then says he was last dispatched to the Bringer Dukedom, right? Godhand is surprised, and Taku says that just because he's stuck here in the south it doesn't mean he's assumed to the rest of the world. Godhand's status window doesn't have much information, besides where he was stationed. But he can guess what else happened. Godhand's team was dispatched to the Bringer Dukedom a year ago, and an Everblack ambassador was assassinated 9 months ago. This increased the tension of the countries, causing a war start. And since the Iggy's group specializes in infiltration and assassination, they stay silent, and Taku says he came up with a theory. Someone higher up in the Empire wanted to take over the Bringer Dukedom, but didn't have a reason to start a war. So what if their ambassador was assassinated in the other region? Then they'd be able to blame the dukedom. Taku recaps his little theory, and says that Godhand's group instantly was arrested without an explanation. And them being sentenced to execution is how they were meant to be silenced. Godhand stares at him, then says if what Taku is saying is true, then they are being wrongfully thrown away for doing their mission. So why would they obediently wait for their death instead of running? Taku says because they have hostages, and that Godhand's people are living as slaves. So for them obediently dying, Godhand's kin would get a reward. Godhand starts to shake, and Taku says he guesses he's right. We learn that any race that isn't humans in this world are treated like slaves, or well, the survivors became slaves after they lost a war to humans. The Everblack Empire led the humans to winning the war, and the current elves are living in the elf district. All living poorly, so it's pretty obvious, as it's something the Empire does to use other species. Taku says it's a virtuous sacrifice, but it's also foolish. Godhand says nothing will change, they've already been sentenced to execution. So he doesn't know why Taku is saying all this to them, and asks if he's mocking them. Taku chuckles, then says the statement just says to carry out the execution, but not how. He could take their lives however he pleases, but where they are is the monster front, so he can just send them to the battlefront and report that the execution has been carried out. Taku gets down on one knee, then asks if they want to live. He asks if no harm comes to Godhand's people would he want to continue living. Godhand asks what they'll accomplish by that. Taku says anything. As long as they are alive, they can do anything. Godhand says not to give them false hope. He can tear them apart, however he'd like them to not care what he does to them, but do not give them hope. Since hope is the most painful thing they could receive. Taku explains how some people live while being used to despair, because if they expect anything then they just get betrayed. But if they give up they won't be hurt. Taku says he doesn't plan to give them hope. He's just giving them an opportunity to not end their lives. Godhand asks why. He's trying to save them. Taku says it's because this place needs them. The monster front is always short on manpower, And if they help, this place will be much easier to defend. The invasions grow ever stronger, and if this place fails, their loved ones will also be in danger. He said a lot, but the choice is theirs. He says he'll ask formally. Then says they can keep living their own lives, but at least help protect their families. Godhand says it's just as he said. They made a promise in the Counterintelligence Corps in return for quietly being disposed of. Their families would receive food and water for a year. Taku thinks it's sad, and Godhand says none of them wanted to die, but their situation was bad enough that it called for them to volunteer their lives. So if Taku cannot take responsibility for them, then he's better off killing them now. But if he takes them in, then please take responsibility for them all. Taku says he will and swears upon his name and his bloodline. Godhand says if that's the case, then breaks the chains, saying that they pledge their loyalty to him. The rest are also freed from their shackles, and begin to take all of their hoods off. Godhand gives some analogy for their loyalty, and tells Taku to throw them away without hesitation. Taku smiles, since he finally got his sub part. Their names are all kind of funny sounding. If you've watched till the end, comment, cat, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.